Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Building Championship Mindsets, the podcast. This is your host, Dr. Amber Selking, where we are in season 16 entitled Winning the Mental Game for Kids. Yes, parents, teachers, coaches, high performers of all ages across the world that we've been talking through these last 15 seasons. We are speaking directly to our kids, to the youth of our world, because we believe that if they can understand and tap into the power of their mind, they can help change our world for the better. So if you're a parent, teacher, coach, driving to school in the morning, flip this podcast on, because now I'm going to shift gears and talk directly to our kids. Guys, listen, the world's in an interesting place right now, and we are going to need you to be your very best self to help us continue to grow, to get better, to bring peace and joy and greatness and high performance in every aspect of the world. But that starts with wherever you are right now. If you can learn how to think right, how to win your mental game, man, our future is going to be in an awesome place. So as we've worked through this season, we've learned a lot, right? We've covered a lot of ground. If you've missed some episodes, go back and listen to them because it builds in a consecutive way. But in this episode, we are going to be looking at intensity management. This is the next play that we have in our mental performance playbook. And this is all about learning how to bring the right level of energy to a moment. If you're like me, sometimes you show up to a place and you're like, man, I'm just not feeling it today. I'm tired. I'm distracted. I don't feel like being in class. I don't feel like going to practice. And you're just kind of low, man. You know, and then guess what? You're not your best self in that moment. But you chalk it up as just, it's just a bad day. And then there's other times, right? You're so jacked up, you're so excited, you're running around like crazy all day that you weren't even able to pay attention in class. And then at practice, coach is yelling at you because you're all over the map, talking in the background and doing all this crazy stuff. And in music class, you're blah, 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 and can't listen. And you're always in trouble because you're just buzzing too much, right? This is what we're talking about today. Because you know there's those other days, those rare few days where you feel like you are locked in. You are in your zone. You are right where you need to be when you need to be there, and you are delivering your best consistently. This could be in the classroom, in sport, in music, even when you're hanging out with your friends or with your family. This is what we're talking about when we talk about intensity management. So there's a really cool theory called individual zones of optimal functioning. And what this theory tells us is that there's a connection between the level of intensity or energy or even anxiety, right? If you want to use that word, that we need to bring to a moment in order for our performance to be at its best. And like I just shared, if your energy or your anxiety level, the anxiety is too low, I don't like to use anxiety because that feels like a negative, but really just like energy, right? Buzz that you have. There's times where you're too low and you're not able to deliver your best for whatever reason. Again, you might have a legitimate reason. You might actually be sick that day. Or there's other times where you're too much. You have too much energy. And because of that, you're not able to focus enough and get in that right spot to deliver your best. But right in the middle, there's this thing called an optimal zone where you bring the right level of intensity of energy to a moment and your peak performance comes out. And so what I want to help you understand is that there isn't a reason for that to just happen by chance. You have an opportunity to consistently find that zone and then get there and deliver your best. So what I want you to think about, I want you to think about one of the best moments or experiences that you've had as an athlete, as a student, as a musician, whatever it might be. And then what was the level of energy or intensity that you were bringing to that moment, even to like gaming, right? Whatever it is that you do. Like there's times where you're like, if you're a gamer, right? You're sitting there and you're not really paying attention. You're just chilling. Or there's times where you're just like you're too energetic and your thumbs aren't working right. And then there's times where you're just like locked in, right? So whatever it is that you do, think about that time where you were like in your zone. And then I want you to think about on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is low and 10 is high, what number would you put on that level of intensity or energy that you brought to that game or to that moment? That's your optimal zone. And so then I want you to think about, well, man, what does that optimal zone feel like for me? And so for me I was a soccer player. And for me as a soccer player, I used to think, like if you told me a scale of 1 to 10, I would say like my optimal zone is an 11 because I'm like have a ton of energy and I'm all over the place. But what I learned is that my optimal zone is more like a 7 or 8. And so if I dial it back a little bit, I took all of my intensity and my aggression and was able to channel it a little bit better. And so to me, my optimal zone of a 7.5, 8 felt like I had energy. I was communicating. I could see the field really well. I wanted contact, but I didn't always initiate contact. I focused on the ball, not just taking people out, right? And so that's what my optimal zone felt like. Now, when I got too high, I started just going after people, right? Making tackles to make tackles, getting yellow cards or red cards. Or when I was too low, my body just felt heavy. Like I felt like I wasn't light on my feet, right? And so that's what I want you to think about for yourself. What does your optimal zone feel like? And then if it's too high, what does that feel like? If it's too low, what does that feel like? The reason we do that is because, again, we have to be aware before we enhance. As you become aware of your optimal zone and aware of when you get too high or too low, now you can start to enhance it. And so every week we have our championship mindset training, things that we can do to help us apply or use the mental play that we talked about. And the championship mindset training I have for you this week is to use your breathing to help you get into your optimal zone. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is if you find that you are too high, right? You're too amped up. You're bringing too much energy to the moment. You're buzzing before class and you can't pay attention to your teacher. Focus on your breath to slow your heart rate down and bring you back into your optimal zone. Here's how we do proper breathing. Proper breathing is in through your nose, down into your belly, and then out through your mouth. In through your nose, down into your belly, out through your mouth. When people often take a deep breath, they take a deep breath and a lot of times their shoulders come up. We don't want to do that. We want it to actually go down into the bottom of our lungs, which means our stomach will actually come out instead of our shoulders going up. It's kind of a weird way to breathe. So I want you to practice this week. In through your nose, down into your belly, and out through your mouth. What we know is that 60 to 90 seconds of breathing like this will actually reset your central nervous system and slow things down for you. So you can apply this in training or practice, right? When you start to breathe heavy and you're trying to focus, slow it down through your breath. Or like I said, in class, when you're too excited and all over the place, slow your breathing down. Now, if we're on the other end of the scale and we find ourselves too low, I also want you to focus on your breathing, but a different kind of breathing. This is what we call power breathing, where it's just in through your nose, strong exhale through your mouth, like, right? And what that does is just give us a little burst of blood flow. Maybe you're right after lunch, you're kind of tired. You know, your class right after lunch, you get tired, or the second class after lunch, you get tired. So maybe you take a couple drinks of water, you go to the bathroom, you do some of that power breath, you get your power pose that we learned about last week, right? And then when you go into your class, don't slouch. Don't fold your arms and sit back in your chair. Sit up, right? Act like you want to be there. Bring some energy to that moment so that you can push yourself up into your optimal zone. The same is true if then you go to practice, whether it's music or band, or even if you're or your sport practice and you're just tired from the end of the day. That's fair. I know you've had a long day. You got up early. You used a lot of brain power. But guess what? Now you have practice. So you got to show up. You got to bring some energy. Do some power breaths. That's why we have a warm up in sport. Right? Whatever way you need to do to get into that optimal zone, get there. Because you are too important. This day is too important. Never leave excellence to chance. And now you know your zone doesn't have to be this thing that some days you have and some days you don't. You can identify it and you can get there. And the reality of it is you have a different optimal zone in class than you do in your sport, than you do when you're hanging out with your friends, than you do when you're in whatever it is your extracurricular activity might be. Find that zone and then get there. and use your breathing this week as your championship mindset training to turn up or turn down to get into your optimal zone. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today and learned a lot and just want some more or have more questions or want to do some digging, check out our website. It's www.selkingperformance.com. And there you can find additional resources of articles, a link to our book, Winning the Mental Game, the playbook for building championship mindset, a whole team of performance coaches that if you'd be interested in discussing more with about your own performance journey, please send me an email directly, drselking@selkingperformance.com. And then if there's any keynote opportunities that might be meaningful, because we spoke directly to our kids today, but what we know is that every person, every industry, regardless of where you're at in the world, what clients or customers you serve, when your people perform better on a day-to-day basis, your business performs better and your clients are happier and more retentive, right? So send me an email directly, drselking@selkingperformance.com. I'd love to hear your stories about how this podcast is impacting you or the kids in your life and how we might be able to come alongside of you on your performance journey. Thanks so much for tuning in. You've been listening to Building Championship Mindsets, the podcast. This is your host, Dr. Amber Selking, and from the locker room to the boardroom, I just want to challenge you to continue building your championship mindset.